Good evening and welcome to the monthly meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals, also known as the BZA. I'm Judy Freshman, Chair of the Board. The Board's made up of 5 citizens appointed by the Circuit Court. In addition to myself, we have Charles Smith, Intamalis, Paul Melnick, and Peter Owen. Also present is the professional staff, including Amanda Clement, who serves as Secretary to the Board of Zoning Appeals, Arlova Vaughn, a Zoning Administrator, Blake Bowen, Assistant to the Zoning Administrator, and Simon Keynes, Administrative Technician. We thank you for being here and extend a warm welcome. To avoid disruptions, we ask that you please turn your cell phones or pagers off or put them in silent mode. On the front table, you will find copies of the staff report for each case before us this evening. I recommend that if you've not yet seen the report for your case, that you get a copy and review it before your case is called. The Board's powers are prescribed in the Code of Virginia and are set out in further detail in the county zoning ordinance adopted by the County Board. The Board of Zoning Appeals does not have the power to rezone property or amend the regulations set forth in the ordinance. That authority rests with the County Board. This Board does have the authority to do 3 things. We can approve use permits that allow modifications of placement requirements for structures on 1- and 2-family lots where there is no option in the zoning ordinance to allow such modifications. We can grant variances from the specific requirements of the zoning ordinance. And we can decide appeals of decisions of the zoning administrator. When approving use permits, the Board of Zoning Appeals may impose conditions that it deems necessary in the public interest, including limiting the duration of the use permit. In order to approve a use permit, the law requires that the Board find that the proposal meet conditions and that the use permit will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing in the neighborhood, will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in the neighborhood, and will not be in conflict with the purposes of the master plans and land use and zoning related policies of the county. To do this, the BZA shall consider whether the modification will promote compatibility of development with the surrounding neighborhood, because the structure's overall footprint, size, and placement are similar to the structures on the properties surrounding the lot in question, and whether the modification will help preserve natural landform, historic features, and/or significant trees and foliage. When granting variances, the Board must determine that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, or that granting of the variance would alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition related to the property or improvements thereon, that the hardship is not generally shared by other properties in the same zoning district, and that the authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property, and the character of the district will not be changed by the granting of the variance. A Virginia Supreme Court ruling requires that a variance cannot be granted unless the effect of the zoning ordinance as applied to the piece of property under consideration would, in the absence of a variance, interfere with all reasonable beneficial uses of the property taken as a whole. When deciding appeals of the zoning administrator, the Board must determine if the administrator acted correctly. This evening, cases will be called and a brief staff report and recommendation will be given. Following that, Board members will ask any questions of the staff they may have. Next, applicants or their representative will be given an opportunity to make comments in support of the application or appeal. If they choose to make a comment, they must come forward to the podium so their comments can be recorded for the record. Next, all speakers for the item will be called. Speakers must fill out a speaker slip, which is available on the table in the front of the room. After we hear from speakers for and against the proposal, the Board may permit the applicant a brief opportunity to clarify any points. The Board may ask questions of any speaker, but does not permit and will not condone any cross-examination or direct questioning by others. We've deemed the following time limits for speakers to be sufficient: 20 minutes for applicants of appeals, 5 minutes for applicants of use permits and variances. For use permits, variances, and appeals, we've deemed 3 minutes for representatives of organizations and 2 minutes for individuals as sufficient. After the Board has gathered all the information they need and discussed the case, it will decide the matter by voting on a motion duly made and seconded. A majority is needed to approve any motion. Any appeal from the decision of this Board must be made to the Circuit Court in accordance with state law. After your case of interest is heard, you're welcome to stay for the balance of the session or leave at your convenience. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Please call the first case.
V-10888-14-UP-5 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 10 feet to the eve of a new third-floor addition from the 21st Road North right-of-way instead of 25 feet as required, and to permit a building in excess of 2.5 stories within 25 feet of a street right-of-way. This is for a new third-story addition above the existing second-story walls. The staff recommendation is to defer the use permit to the August 2017 Board of Zoning Appeals hearing.
Questions? Is there an applicant present or a representative? Okay, thank you. Comments, questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Owen.
we see this item every month or two. I've only been on the BZA for a year, but it's been coming back over and over and over again since I've been here. I do not see the benefit-reward ratio of the staff time and the board's time and the natural resources to continue to process this monthly or bi-monthly without any reason to believe the situation's changing. So I would just offer that if someone's willing to make a motion to have a longer period of deferral, I would certainly support it.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Malice.
I agree with Mr. Owen that we keep seeing this item deferred month after month after month. And my understanding is there's no staff interaction on this item?
No, just aside from the request to continue deferral.
Okay. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals defer use permit V 10888-14-UP-5 to the October 2017 BZA hearing.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Mr. Melnick to defer to October. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case.
V-11219-17-VA-1 is a variance request to permit a setback of 0 feet to the edge of the roof from the rear property line instead of 25 feet as required, and 0 feet to the side lot line instead of 10 feet as required, and to permit the maximum lot coverage to exceed 56%. This is for a new carport, and the staff recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution denying the variance request.
Questions for the staff?
Yes. Did you give us additional materials for consideration since we received the packet?
Yes, there was some supplemental information that was submitted by the applicant today. There are plans dated April 17th, 2017, which show a slightly modified carport with regard to the side lot line. Rather than it being 0 feet, it is now shown at 1 foot to the right side property line.
Are there any other materials that you presented for our consideration?
I believe the applicant also provided a photograph and 3 additional consent letters from neighboring properties.
Is there anything else?
There is nothing further. Oh, I apologize. There was also a statement at the request that it be anonymous.
So staff received an email from a citizen who identified themselves to you, but requested that you not identify them to us. And so you have presented us with their statement, but without their identifying information. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So before we begin, I would like to express my concern with that procedure. I don't think that a person who submits an email to county staff is by law, under these circumstances, is by Virginia law able to have an expectation that their statement would be anonymous. And so there's both a short-term and a long-term issue, right? The long-term issue is what should we do when someone asks staff to submit materials anonymously to us? And the short-term issue is what should we do with this piece of paper that has been presented to us tonight? My inclination with the piece of paper that's been presented to us tonight is that it is an incomplete document that was sent to us by staff, that it lacks important information that it should include. And so my inclination would be, as a board, not to accept the document into evidence and not to consider it. As a long-term matter, I would, again, speaking for myself individually until I know the will of the rest of the board, but as a long-term matter, I would advise our staff not to abide by any requests for anonymity, because I don't think that's really something they're empowered to do. I won't go so far as to say the board can't accept anonymous statements, but I don't think that we can be in a position to allow staff to be the ones to anonymize things on behalf of citizens. So that's my concern.
I would certainly concur with that, and I think in this particular case, obviously, if someone sent an email, it can't possibly be anonymous, and it puts the burden on staff, which I think is inappropriate. So my suggestion would be, if and when that ever happens again, that the staff respond by saying the board does not want anonymous commentary. We rely on people to sign petitions, send in letters, and show up to testify. If they feel strongly, but not so strongly as to be identified, or fear repercussions or something like that, that's not our issue either. So I would say in the future, if this happens, simply tell people that, respond in that way and give that person the option to either withdraw their comments or agree that the name and address will be included.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Malice.
Just to follow up on that, I concur that we should not accept anonymous testimony. I'm not sure. I would go further to say under any circumstances, whether through staff or some other means. I think all of our testimony has to be cited. If Mr. Owen can think of some situation where he would consider anonymous outside of that, I'd be willing to consider that. But to me, this is all in the public record, and so everything that comes to us should be on the record with names and addresses, just like people that come here and testify. Further, anything that comes to county staff is public record. And so I think your only course of action is to tell the sender that you're giving them an opportunity to recall the message. Because if they don't recall the message, it goes in the public record, it's foiable, we can ask you, and you have to tell us. So it's not anonymous. But I agree that we can't get in the practice of anonymous comments. Also, just from the principle, but also it's very difficult for us to evaluate anonymous comments. Is this from a neighbor that lives next door or on the other side of town? And that would certainly make a big difference in how we might consider comments. The last thing is I wonder if there could be some legal research for the state of Virginia in terms of public testimony. Is it required that public testimony be attributed?
Mr. Melnick.
So my comments, I concur completely that some research ought to be done, about the whole fact we take comments, people get to comment and talk. What does the law say about anyone? Like what if somebody was up here talking and they didn't want to say their name? How does that figure in? But I think the way. My personal thoughts are that it ought to go to the weight of whatever we're considering. That if somebody doesn't have the address or their name, then it shouldn't carry very much weight at all. But that I'd be hesitant without research, and I'm sure there's something out there about anonymity and comments at a public forum like this, especially a quasi-judicial group like we are. But that's what I would say. I'd be hesitant to ban it. Without some backup research, but But my main point is that it should just go to the weight. If somebody wants to give us something and we have no idea where they are, just give it very little weight. Those are my comments.
I tend to agree with Mr. Melnick that I'm not prepared today to say that the board should not under any circumstances accept anonymous material by any means. I don't know whether or not that should or could be the case, but I agree with the others who have said that it's something that should be researched. But I do know that, or I do still feel that this particular piece of evidence is not something we can process, given the conundrum that's created by the fact that staff has a FOIable document, and yet we, as the board, are at the moment alone in the universe as the people who don't know its full content. And I think that if we were to begin to consider it, we would potentially create knots. And so the safer course of action is to push it back, not accept it into our record at all. And so I would move that we not accept this one-page letter, one-page email sent to Amanda Clement that was presented to us today.
I'd second that.
If I could have
Mr. Melnick.
one more comment. I think it's very important that under no circumstances that the staff or this group, even if there could be anonymity, that we guarantee it in any fashion. Just because, with magic markers and print and everything, there's just no way that could ever be guaranteed. So, if somebody's like, I want to stay anonymous, I want to black out my name, it's just like, well, there's always a chance that we're going to see it. But that's just my final comment on it.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Owen and seconded by Ms. Malice to not accept the redacted email that was presented to us for this case. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, can we proceed with the case?
I'm actually a no.
You're an A. Sorry. 3 and 1.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we still need to hear the item.
Yes.
Yeah. Do I need to read it again?
Sorry? Do we have the applicant, please, for this case? With the applicant for South Buchanan Street? Okay, come forward, please.
While he's coming up, may I ask staff another question? So this is not part, this what you received today is not part of our package?
That's correct.
That's correct.
That is not part of the original package that you received. That's additional information.
So does this change your recommendation?
It does not change our recommendation. We're still recommending denial.
Thank you. Would you state your names for the record, please?
Felix Carcamo.
Felix Carcamo.
Thank you. And would you please present your testimony?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Owen.
Since this is being recorded for anyone who's listening to this later, I see that there is a translator assisting the applicant.
Okay. Would you please state that you're your name in the translation?
Yes, my name is Sherlyn Varela, Spanish interpreter for Arlington County.
Thank you very much. Proceed, please.
Solamente traigo con las otras firmas de las otras personas que he tenido que no les afecta.
I just want to tell you that I have additional signatures of other people that have agreed with me that this doesn't bother them, and I have these signatures here with me today.
Eso sería todo en mi
Madam Chair,
Be all that I have to say.
Mr. Owen.
are those the same or different than the signatures that were just presented to us tonight by staff?
son las mismas y me pidieron la vez pasada que trajera la dirección y el número de teléfono de ellas.
They are the same, but last time I was asked if I could bring their addresses and names, and I have them today, but they're the same that the staff received today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I'm a little confused. So in our packet, some of these do not have addresses.
But in this,
And the addresses are in here?
I believe that's what he's saying. These pictures.
No las mandó todas. No.
And I have additional signatures that were not sent today, so I have additional ones that you might not have.
Does he plan to present those to us?
If,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we have additional signatures. We have a supplemental packet, and we have additional signatures. And we have a staff recommendation which remains unchanged. Do we have questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Mr. Owen?
This may be for the applicant or for staff. Are there other enforcement actions, zoning enforcement or code enforcement actions on this property that are active right now? Or is this would this lack of a variance cure all of the purported violations on this property that the zoning office has seen?
I can only confirm that we have the active zoning enforcement, whether there are active code enforcement cases at this time.
And then I guess I would ask the applicant, is it your are you aware of any other county enforcement actions that are being investigated at this time on your property?
No.
Okay, thank you. Have you made any additional attempts to talk to your next door neighbor, the one with the shed, who abuts the edge of this carport, since we last had a meeting?
No, no hemos platicado con ella.
No, I haven't talked to her, no. I just modified the property and that was it,
Como me lo pidió la corte.
as it was requested.
Thank you.
One of the requirements under the law for us in order to approve a variance, part of the law says that we need to decide whether or not it is unreasonable. That's the word the law uses, unreasonable, not to let you use your property this way. Can you address why it would be unreasonable not to allow you to violate the coverage requirements of the ordinance? Not to be able to build this additional structure that otherwise you or your neighbors would not be allowed to build near your house?
Yo solamente lo estamos usando para una sombra nada más, porque no tengo árboles en el terreno.
Well, we were just using it because we don't have trees in the lot, so it was just basically to give some shade to the property. But that's the only reason why, because we don't have trees.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, why don't you just stay in the front, sit in the front in case we need to ask you any additional questions? We have one speaker, Thelma Velasquez. Please state your name and also state your role. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Thelma. Good afternoon, my name is Thelma Velasquez.
Good evening. My name is Cara Cheatham, and I'm serving as Spanish interpreter for Ms. Velasquez.
Thank you.
Yo estoy viniendo porque recibí una carta, pero yo no estoy de acuerdo con la construcción de mi vecino.
I came because I received a letter about this variance, but I'm not in favor of this construction by my neighbor.
Porque si ustedes lo pueden ver, él se montó sobre del techo de mi garaje.
So, as you probably can see from the pictures, the roof of his construction is touching my garage in the back.
Y además de que, otra cosa que nunca le he dicho a él ni nada, pero se mantienen muchas cosas ahí y hay muchos y salen ratones.
And also, he keeps a lot of things back there, and it attracts mice and rats.
Y me gustaría que si él construye, que lo haga como la ley lo indica.
And I would like, if he wants to construct back there, that he does it like the law says.
Yo escuché a él de que tiene cartas de los vecinos, pero la vecina perjudicada soy yo, no los otros. Los otros viven lejos y retirados.
I heard that he has signatures from other neighbors supporting him, but those other neighbors don't live next door to him. I live next door, and I'm the one who's affected by this.
Anything else?
Nada más. Gracias. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
Mr. Owen,
if I may ask a question of the speaker.
please.
It's my understanding at our last hearing, we heard that the shed in the back of your yard was allowed with a variance. That either you or your previous owner of the property applied to the county and received a variance using a process similar to the one we're hearing tonight. Are you the one who applied for the variance?
No.
Did you know
No.
that your own shed would not be permitted unless there was a variance?
Se supone que cuando yo lo compré, eso está en el mapa y ya está.
When I purchased the house, that was there on the map of the property.
Yo la compré así.
I bought it like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the speaker?
Lo quitamos.
Thank you. Comments, questions?
I guess I'd like to review again. Is there a carport that he could build by right?
No, given the size of the property and the available rear yard that they have, I don't believe that there would be a by right option. The rear addition of the house is already encroaching into the rear yard setback, leaving no buildable area in the back, and same with the side of the property.
Mr. Melnick.
So I have a question for staff. So in a case like this, I know staff a lot of times has, in various circumstances, certain measurements that you're okay with, just depending on the circumstance. And in this particular case, if somebody came to you and said, I want to give shelter to a car, I want to be able to store some things, whether it's a garage or a carport or a shed, what would typically be the limits of what the staff would be willing to approve in a case like this? Like, can you give, just an example of what it might be?
Well, so, I mean, in a situation like this, because we're dealing with two different issues under this variance, the setback and the coverage, and I think we are less inclined to offer support for anything that is going to go above the allowable 56% lot coverage. A lot of times, in similar type cases, what we would be dealing with is perhaps a one-family dwelling on a standard residential lot, and we could consider this under a use permit request. But here, we're having to look at this under the variance criteria, and given that we have the coverage issue as well as setback, I'm not sure if there would be an option in this rear yard that we would be comfortable with.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen.
A question for staff. Are use permits allowed in the RA 1426 district?
They are not.
So there is no use permit option?
There is not.
Other questions?
I have one. Just
Mr. Melnick.
I can't recall, without delving into this, but what is the current coverage, without this carport? Does the staff have that? Just, like, in other words, without this particular carport improvement, what is the coverage?
I can get that number in just a moment.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen.
Just a statement. I made this statement in the record at the last hearing, but I should repeat it now. I should have probably repeated it before we called the item. But I am acquainted with the applicant. The applicant used to be an employee of a condominium building I once lived in, and so I'm acquainted with him, but I've determined that this acquaintance does not affect my objectivity in this particular case.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Ms. Clement.
So without this rear structure, the existing lot coverage would be roughly 55.5%, so just under the 56% maximum.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thanks a lot.
One more question for staff. The addition, was that a by right, as far as you know? I don't see any.
I found a record of the building permit that was issued. I think it was built in 1986, and I did not find a record of a prior variance approval, which suggests perhaps there was a change in the ordinance for these rear yard setbacks, but I do believe it was done by right at the time.
Any additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Ms. Malice.
our standard for variances is described in staff's conclusion, and that is that the variance would alleviate a demonstrable hardship, or a lack of variance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. I don't believe that threshold has been met. While I understand the applicant's wish to provide some protection, that wish is not sufficient to allow a variance. The variance standard is very, a much higher standard than a use permit. And those two things, as the staff report says, a demonstrable hardship or something that results in your inability to utilize the property has occurred, and I don't believe that has. So I would support staff's recommendation for denial.
Is that a motion,
I can make it a motion.
please?
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution denying variance V 11219-17-VA-1.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Mr. Melnick for the staff's recommendation of denial of the application.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Owen.
I'm going to support the motion for denial. I do think that there's an equity issue here that troubles me. I note that the next door neighbor has a shed that's just 1 foot away from the applicant's property line, and that shed and that incursion on the applicant's property was allowed apparently by the Board of Zoning Appeals in a variance. And yet we're not tonight giving any particular relief to the applicant. And that troubles me a little bit. But I think I'm going to support the motion tonight because I think the extent and nature of the structure that the applicant is seeking is, even with the modification, which addresses water runoff onto the neighboring property, is the only reasonable way for the applicant to exceed what would otherwise be allowed by right. So I guess there probably are some variances that I would entertain for this property that are, I personally, not speaking for anyone else but myself, but I think that I'm not satisfied that leaving the applicant with only his by right options is reasonable, given how his property is abutted now with the other variants. But I still don't think that this particular application presents a reasonable application. So I'll support this particular motion at this particular time.
Mr. Melnick.
Yeah, just for the record, I share Mr. Owen's thoughts and concerns about this. And it is the the extent of this and this particular plan. I mean, I notice around here there are garages and sheds and outbuildings, and there's at least 3 that I see on the tax map, and I'd encourage the applicant to reevaluate in light of what is in the neighborhood already, and maybe do a resubmission, because I would seriously consider it if it was more in line with what is seen around this property, and not something so massive.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Malice.
I'd certainly welcome reapplication under different circumstances. I mean, if that's the applicant's right. The argument about equity, I think, obviously you want to be fair, but at this point, I don't have enough information to completely understand the situation on the neighbor's house, what their coverage situation is. All I know is that there's a shed up against the fence, but whether they're also, there's 2 issues here. There's coverage and the setback, and whether it's a setback issue or a coverage and coverage issue. So if this were ever to come back with a different plan, I'd want to explore consistency in the neighborhood.
I agree with Ms. Malice.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11220-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 17.2 feet to the porch from the 18th Street North right-of-way instead of 21 feet as required, and 16.2 feet to the eave instead of 19.5 feet as required, 15.6 feet to the wall from the North Jackson Street right-of-way instead of 25 feet as required, and 14.8 feet to the eave instead of 21 feet as required, and 4.5 feet to the edge of the roof from the left side property line instead of 8 feet as required. This is for a new porch, attached garage, and covered patio. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request to permit a setback of 17.2 feet to the porch from the 18th Street North right-of-way instead of 21 feet as required, and 16.2 feet to the eave instead of 19.5 feet as required, 15.6 feet to the wall from the North Jackson Street right-of-way instead of 25 feet as required, and 14.8 feet to the eave instead of 21 feet as required, but only permitting a setback of 5 feet to the edge of the roof from the left side property line instead of the 4.5 feet as requested.
Thank you. Questions for the staff, please? Okay, let's hear from the applicant. I have a note that there's a representative here. Eddie Clarkson. Here. Okay. Please identify yourself as the applicant's agent, and we also have Rebecca.
Yes.
Yes. One at a time, please.
I'm Rebecca Bostic, architect. We are coming before you for the second time, having went back to work things out with the adjacent neighbor after her comments at our first meeting. Ms. Lundstrom had out-of-town business this week and couldn't be here. She sent Abby. To start, we did cut everything back, the rear patio roof as asked, along with the new addition to take away the need for the variance. And I have to start out by saying that the drainage video that the neighbor presented at our first hearing that was of great concern to the board caught me completely off guard because I didn't see any evidence of that problem when I was surveying the site during design before our meeting. After the meeting, I went back over to the site to review closer, and everything I had proposed at our meeting to do to fix the problem was already done. The drainage video was roughly 2 years old. The neighbor created the problem by removing her landscaping, changing the grades along the property line. Mrs. Lundstrom had made the video to show her neighbor what happened from her change, and the neighbor repaired the problem. None of this was of Mrs. Lundstrom's making. The problem doesn't exist today. It didn't exist at our February meeting. It appears to be kind of an old grudge. The stone drainage ditch that runs along the property line is properly graded and is sloping so that all the water runs to the street and not to the neighbor's property. But nonetheless, we have cut back the rear patio roof as requested. It currently extends 1.8 feet from the property line. The staff has asked to cut back to allow a full 5-foot setback. We are requesting several inches of leeway from this 5 feet. The existing back porch extends 4.5 feet from the property line, and I would like to be able to utilize the existing footings and structural line of the porch columns for our new roof. The rear patio roof was not part of the original scope of the project and pushed the budget up quite a bit, so we're asking for a small compromise here by allowing us to extend the roof using existing structure. The narrow backyard is a paved stone patio, and two things. One, keeping everything in the same line across the back of the house would look a lot better in this tight backyard. And two, not having the expense of breaking up and replacing the stone patio for 2 additional footings would soften the budget just a little bit. We did discuss this with the neighbor. I had told her it was 4.6 feet from the property line because I was basing it off my field measurement of 10 feet to the fence, thinking the fence was the property line. The neighbor agreed she would not object to the extra couple inches so that we could use the structural post. It wasn't until the last minute when I turned in the paperwork and I used the plat dimension of 9.8 that it became 4.5 instead of 4.6, so 2 inches. I know the neighbor has now expressed concern over the wrong dimensions, but again, it was just my field dimension in the beginning. Nothing moved. We didn't change anything, increase, decrease, nothing. The structural line is still proposed in the same existing spot that I had described to her. Turns out the fence is 2 inches over the property line. We have complied with your request for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Again, we're asking for a little compromise by allowing the new patio roof to have a structure in line with the existing porch structure. Of course, along with the roof change, we are adding gutters and buried downspouts, as we had originally talked about in the last meeting. Last item, our addition. When we met with the neighbor, we were able to resolve everything and give her everything that she asked for, except for the side steps. The stairs are important to be on the sign shown as they connect to the backyard, to the grill space, to the back porch, the entry into the kitchen. The stairs do not make any sense on any other side of our porch addition. We did make the stairs several inches smaller and agreed to build them as sturdy as possible to dampen the stomping noise of concern to the neighbor. But moving the stairs is not an option to our design. And as the staff points out, they are also within the allowable setbacks. I was under the impression that except for the stairs, the neighbor was happy and willing to approve our project. We've made some expensive compromises to work things out with the neighbor that continues to invent new problems and reasons why this should not be built. Ms. Lundstrom met again with her neighbor on Monday night to discuss the latest issues, but I understand to no resolve. I must point out that we do have the support of the 4 surrounding neighbors that think this will be a wonderful addition to her property. They had all signed one letter at our first hearing, but this time they took the time to write their own letter of support to let the board know that this project has neighborhood support. I hope we can also have board approval.
Hello, I am Addie Clarkson. I live with Katie Lundstrom, and she will soon be my aunt. I have lived with her for almost 4 months, and in that time, I have witnessed her being very thoughtful towards all of her neighbors. She is always friendly and inclusive towards them and constantly strives to build a strong sense of community with those around her. In the time that I have lived with her, I have experienced her dog sitting for those who live around us, watering plants for neighbors when they are out of town, and inviting neighboring families over for dinner. Katie is very involved in and dedicated to the community and the lives of the families around us. Since I have been there, she has hosted numerous gatherings for community leaders and groups, the likes of which are all meant to build up people in their lives. Some of which include a weekly women's Bible study. She uses her time, her life, and her house as a way to serve others and promote community. Your approval of the plans will be a great gift to Katie and the community, not to mention the additional garage space will help my grandma Mush, who turns 80 this summer and intends to live with Katie part-time in the near years, to be able to access the house and live in the downstairs bedroom with minimal demand to maneuver up and down the stairs. Since the beginning, accommodating her aging parent has been part of the vision for the plan. As for the neighborhood, I personally know that there are 4 neighbors surrounding us who are extremely in favor of the plans and believe that it will bring value to the neighborhood. The street we live on, 18th Street, is all brick colonials that are quite sizable relative to ours. In regard to the one opposing neighbor, I cannot speak on this since, unfortunately, I have not met her or seen her outside in the 4 months that I have lived there, though I look forward to meeting her one day. Finally, I want to emphasize that Katie is always mindful of her neighbors and strives to promote a sense of community among them. At every turn of this process, she is stressed over trying to accommodate any opposition. You cannot get a more thoughtful and responsible neighbor than Katie. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for either speakers?
Madam Chair,
I have
Ms.
questions.
Owen.
I'll defer to Ms. Malice.
Ms. Malice.
That's all right. I can differ.
You have the more senior service.
Okay. There was also, if I was reading some of the back and forth, some discussion about a landscape buffer.
Yes.
All right. Is that been developed, or is that acceptable to you, or what's your take on that?
Ms. Lundstrom plans to add landscaping. The neighbor said that was no longer a concern of hers because plants will die. But I understand that as we finish the porch and deck, that there will be some landscaping added.
I'm not sure I fully understood. You said the landscaping is no longer an issue because the plants will die?
The neighbor said for her it was one of her requests at the last meeting, but she has since told us that it's no longer a request for her. I believe Mrs. Lundstrom is still planning to add the landscaping.
Okay. And the small and sturdy steps, how is that documented? I mean, I guess there's, if that becomes a condition of this use permit, how would you document what you mean by that?
I believe I put that in our written, when I submitted it, instead of using 5/4 treads, we'll use 2-by material. Instead of doing 2 stringers, we'll put stringers closer together, just as strong as we can make it. So
those steps are documented in the plans that are submitted here?
I thought that we had written that in our comment when we wrote our letter back to resubmit our drawings.
Is that something we have? Ms. Clement, is that something that we have, or that's something that we could refer to? Is that part of the application now?
I believe so, with an updated statement of justification. If you'll
Yes.
give me a moment, I'll try to locate that.
Okay, that was my question.
Mr. Owen?
You mentioned the footings and, I'm sorry, the downspouts, the buried downspouts are part of your plan and was something the neighbor had requested. And I guess my question is to you and to staff, which is, is that an integral part of the submission, and would that be considered a requirement of the use permit as currently proposed? So I'm wondering if, this may not be a question for the applicant, but I'm wondering if, in order to ensure that that actually happens, would we need to add it into the language as a condition of the approval, or is it already integral to the plans in a way that it's required? Talking about the
I believe it's
downspout.
shown on my drawings, so I would expect it's part.
So you say it's shown on the drawings, and you would feel legally bound to build it. Okay. My next question is, what was the outreach to the neighbors at 1804 and 1808 Jackson Street, across the street from this property line?
I don't know, can you?
I'm sorry, what was the question? What was the outreach to them?
Yes, so many neighbors participated in the conversation about these applications, but I don't see anything in the record from 2 neighbors who are close enough across the street to be able to see, the end result. And so I'm just curious why we only have comments from some affected neighbors and not all of them. And so I wanted to learn more about what outreach the applicant had made to those 2 particular neighbors.
Mm-hmm. I was personally responsible for collecting the letters. I know that Katie had reached out to everybody and spoken to them in person. Mm-hmm. And then the evening that I was going to collect them, I was knocking on doors and talking to neighbors. And so I think that they might not have been home. I went to several different houses and that sort of thing. So I think it might just...
In the application, or in the packet that's sent to us, there's a map about 4 pages in. So I don't know how long you've lived at the address, or if I just rattle off 1804 and 1808, if you can picture in your mind's eye which houses those are. So are you saying you don't remember what happened when you visited those houses, or you're sure that I'm just trying to make sure I nail down what the outreach was to those 2 particular houses.
I may not know exactly where those houses are. As I said, I've lived there for 4 months.
Right.
Would
And
that be the application that you did?
So if you turn to the 7th page of the application, there's a map.
Staff report.
Staff report, sorry, the staff report. Thank you. So across Jackson Street from where you live are 2 addresses, 1804 and 1808 Jackson Street. And we don't have any information about their views on this project. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us everything you know about how your family reached out to those particular houses.
okay. Yes. I know that I went by those people's houses. However, I have not seen them outside either, and they did not answer when I was at their house. So I'm not sure what Katie's conversation with them was. But as far as my contact with them goes, I have not had any.
And I can only add that 1804, I believe Katie had told me, are renters, and that she didn't know them well. And I don't know if she talked to them. I just know that that's because I had asked about that house.
Thank you.
Well, I know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have a speaker on this item?
Yes.
All right. I may have another question for you, but I'd like to wait for the speaker for that one.
Okay. Janet Weber.
Good evening. As I have noted in a written statement submitted to the board staff on April 11th, the revised application contains at least two discrepancies. First, written text included in the application states in reference to the proposed roof extension over the existing patio, we are requesting to cut back to 4 feet 8 inches off the property line, while the plat submitted with the application indicates a setback of only 4 foot 6 inches. That has already been discussed. Secondly, written text included in the application states, we have reduced the stairs in width by 6 inches as a compromise, yet an email I received from the architect on April 11th states, we have reduced the width of the stairs by 4 inches. These are inconsistencies that I, as a layman, have been able to identify, but I have no way of knowing what other inconsistencies there may be. They lead me to question the precision and accuracy of the entire plan. I realize that differences of inches may seem trivial, but please bear in mind how uncomfortably close our houses already are. The application also notes that the outdoor stairs have been placed to face my house because my neighbor wishes to have easier access to a movable gas grill and wishes to better situate a proposed wood pile. The fact is that the staircase could be located on the opposite side of the patio where it would not face any neighboring house. While I fully understand my neighbor's preferences, my preference is to not have the outdoor staircase so close to my property and the front bedroom. I would also note that I am very happy that my neighbor wants to have a mother come to live with her. I don't think the outdoor staircase is being put there for the convenience of her aging mother, since there is access to that patio from inside the house. Given my concerns about the application as presented, I have no choice but to note that the application has not met the burden of proof placed on applicants for variances or use permits. The proposed structure's overall footprint size and placement are not similar to the structures on the property surrounding the lot in question. In my written objection, I've listed 17 brick ramblers along Jackson Street and Kirkwood Place. My neighbor's house is one of those 17, and due to a 1955 addition, it already is larger than and has more garage capacity than 13 of the other comparator houses.
Please sum up. Your time is up. Any questions for the speaker?
Go ahead.
Mr. Melnick.
I have one to staff, if I could. Okay. Mention's being made of the stairway, but from the materials, it looks like the stairway position that's not really an issue as far as encroachments. Isn't that right? It looks like it's well in.
That's correct. The location of the stairs in proximity to the side property line is actually a dimension that's meeting what the ordinance says is appropriate.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Owen.
Yes, I think I couldn't find it just a moment ago, but I think I read in your letter to us that you had some concern about the timing of the removal of the metal awning. Is that something you wrote to us about?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
I just want, because of my concerns about the difference of a few inches that don't seem to really matter, I'm concerned that whatever you decide to do, if you decide to approve this in any way, shape, or form, that it is in such a way that removal of the metal awning must happen simultaneous with any proposed addition to the house, to the structure. I don't know how to make that binding. I leave that to you.
There was some discussion earlier tonight about a landscape barrier. Can you share with us your views on landscaping, a landscape buffer?
I'm skeptical of landscape. They're very nice, but as we all know, things die. So yes, it would be very nice to have a landscape barrier there, but it doesn't alleviate my concerns about privacy for the front bedroom.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for the speaker? Thank you.
If I could have
Mr. Melnick.
clarification, I'm a little unclear about your reasoning for wanting the removal of any awning to be commensurate with the addition. What is your reasoning?
The awning is 1 foot 8 inches or 1.8 feet from my property line, and I did experience flooding from it. The drainage ditch that is mentioned in the application is not a drainage ditch. The drainage ditch is my property and a berm that I paid $1,400 to have put in to keep the water away from the rest of my property. So that metal awning has done a lot of damage. I am concerned, this is something that both my neighbor and I inherited. When each of us bought our houses, it was already there. And when previous shrubs that I had along that line died, and they told me it was because of too much water, I hadn't thought of, and were removed, that's when we discovered that the shrubs had been holding back water. And so the metal awning does flood my property, and the only thing that keeps it from flooding my property right now is the berm that I paid to have constructed, 1 foot inside, losing a whole foot of, my property. And every time it rains, I worry that that berm isn't going to hold back the water, and I'm going to get flooded again. Does that make sense?
Can I follow up?
Ms. Mallers?
So the awning is causing you a problem.
Yes.
So why are you concerned about when it's removed?
My concern is that, my concern is that it might still be possible I want it to happen. I don't want permission to be given to proceed with the patio addition to the house, adding to the footprint of the house. There's two issues here on the side and the front, and I don't want the board to allow the garage addition to be built on the one side without ensuring that at the same time that metal awning is removed.
Why? I'm not. What does that advance?
So my property won't be flooded?
But isn't the awning the thing that's flooding your property?
The metal awning.
Gone.
But you want it gone.
Yes. I want to, yeah. If you agree
Right,
to.
we understand that.
Okay.
Okay, but
I think
you're just saying you want it gone. And why does it matter when it's gone?
I want to make sure that the only way to enforce removal of, the only mechanism to force removal of the metal awning is if you decide to approve construction of the garage. My neighbor likes the metal awning coming to 1.8 feet of my property. She likes that. And I can understand why she would like that, but I don't.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Melnick first.
Oh, yeah. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you don't want the metal awning to linger, for a long period of time, and you just want, you want it to be gone as soon as possible. In other words, you don't want one part of the construction to begin and that linger. You want the cause of what you're saying is flooding to end sooner than later.
Or simultaneous with, but not that the construction could proceed on the front of the house, and then the awning get forgotten and just remain there forever.
Okay, I see.
Mr. Owen?
I was going to ask the same question that Mr. Melnick just asked. So I think I get it. My understanding is that the neighbor is concerned that the construction might be phased so that the awning replacement would be the very last thing potentially occurring a long time later, and that would prolong the problem that she's having. And so it's unclear what the applicant's intentions are. And so that was my other question I had for the applicant's representative, which I'd like to ask when I have the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much. Applicant?
If I could ask one more question.
Yes.
So this dispute about these few inches, of course, and I understand what you're saying about it seeming trivial, but I understand when you're close, it matters. But
To me, it goes to accuracy, precision, and good faith. That's all.
yeah, but aside, just my question is, aside from the discrepancies that you've seen, is that the main thing that bothers you, or is it the actual position? Like, because they were saying for the budget, it would help them not to have to remove, pillars or pilings, the supports, and aside from your dismay about the numbers that you see are different, is that the problem, or is it actually the position? If it weren't for the discrepancies, would you mind that extra 2 feet closer? It's not 2 feet, but 2 inches. Sorry.
Okay, I think you're kind of conflating. There's the side issue. There's the I was talking about the stairs. That's the steps attached to the proposed raised patio, and so is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the roof edge.
Okay.
I understand.
The roof edge. Yeah, I had agreed to compromise in good faith to 4 feet 8 inches from the property line. When I suddenly saw 4 feet 6 inches getting closer, it just worried me because it was not what we had discussed, and it goes again to precision and good faith, and that's what worries me. And I know that the staff has stayed with their original recommendation of a 5-foot setback. I saw in the.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bostic, would you come back, please? Talk to us about phasing and awnings, at least.
Phasing, the project has become rather expensive. So the more phasing we take, the more expensive it will get, meaning contractor will have to come back several times. So our approach will be to do it all at once. We may have to separate the front porch to do it a later time based on the 2,500 square feet of disturbed area.
So if that's the case, then I presume it would be no burden on the applicant if we were to include a condition that the awning be removed as, I don't know what the way this is usually done is there's a series of permits that come throughout the project from the county, right? And so you say before this certain permit happens, the awning is gone. And so I'm wondering, maybe you could, since you're a professional.
See that as being a burden. I mean, it will all be on the same drawing, so it would all be the same permit.
Not be a burden. Do either you or
I understand
yes?
what maybe staff knows. Is there a series of permits here?
It just depends on how they decide to approach the project. They can apply for one permit showing all of these different elements on it. And essentially we could approve all of these things at the same time. That wouldn't ensure, however, that the awning is actually removed prior to the start of any other construction.
Unless it was a condition.
Unless it was a condition. And we, at that time, required evidence of its removal prior to approving a permit, maybe.
So the condition would be that the awning is removed before any other construction begins?
I think I would be open to the applicant's agent, speaking for myself only, I would be open to the applicant's agent's suggestion as to what would be a reasonable milestone by which we should all expect the roof to be removed.
My expectation is that the foundation subcontractor will do all the foundations at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're digging the garage, they will also dig the footings for the new patio roof.
So
it would probably happen pretty much to
the
front,
roof
front
removed
of the project.
prior to the laying of foundation would be reasonable and perfectly consistent with what you were already planning. Is that accurate?
That's probably accurate. Mm-hmm.
Great. As long as we're talking about footings, there was a project, a much bigger, more controversial project a couple of meetings ago where we approved a variance that was based on someone using original walls. And then it turned out that the original walls were rotten. and essentially they lost their variance. And I think that I am a little bit, based on the evidence that I've seen tonight, I don't actually think that you acted in bad faith with regard to the difference in measurements for the back porch, right, as described.
Sloppy, but not bad faith.
But I also understand why the layman neighbor might have thought so, right? So I don't think her perception is unreasonable, even though I also don't think that you were unreasonable based on the evidence I've seen and what you did. But what I could imagine driving the community or observers or the neighbor completely up the wall is if you've represented tonight that you, to save costs, want to use the existing footings, and then it turns out that you don't, right? That the construction is underway, and then actually new footings get poured, and it didn't happen that way. What do you think the chances are that that will come to pass?
I don't think that will come to pass. The porch is there. The posts are there. I've already figured out how we will connect the two posts so they will be in the same space, same location. I don't see that being a problem.
Okay. I mean, if I were being super persnickety, I might want to include that as a condition. But I think that based on what I've seen here, I'm really, really hoping that if we don't waste everyone's time tonight by writing that up, that we won't face that concern that I've just expressed. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you. Comments, concerns, motions?
I have a question for staff. Were you able to confirm the stair step?
And I actually may defer to the architect. I do see in their in the narratives that they've provided, and I think that this falls. At the bottom of page 11 in the report package, there is a paragraph, actually it's the last paragraph, that talks about the stairs, and there's reference to the design being done with thicker materials and stringers closer together to eliminate the vibrations. I don't know if this is the detail that the architect was referring to.
That's what she testified to.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sufficient for, if that were, can you give me the reference? I'm not finding page 11 in our packet.
Yeah, and I apologize, the pages aren't numbered.
Okay.
Beyond the written staff report,
right.
but it is the 11th page in the package. It's the second page of the document that was titled Neighbor Meeting, where they made notes of the meeting.
Right.
And it's the last paragraph beginning with item number 1.
So that's not part of that. This is not part of the submission. It's a reference to an agreement, but it's not documented in the plans that you can see. Or can the
Ms. Bostic?
are they documented in the plan somewhere? Because staff is referring to some meeting notes.
So they're not indicated in the drawings, but they're what I would expect to do on the stairs, because that's what we told the neighbor we would do. And they're documented in those meeting notes.
Okay. So what we need is, we need some specifications that staff or an inspector can look at. Can you come up with specifications?
Stringers at 12 inches on center and 2x material for the treads.
Did you say stringers? I'm sorry, I'm not an architect, so stringers on?
At 12 inches on center, so in other words, the stair supports will be closer together.
And 2x materials, tread materials?
Yes, 2x tread materials.
What does that mean?
That means we'll be using
It's thicker.
Probably 2x6 or 2x12 material as opposed to 5/4, so thicker instead of.
Yes, okay. So 2 by thickness. Just trying to put it into lay terms.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm willing to make a motion if I can sort of try to work through these additions. My motion would be that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution, the alternate, well, it's 4.5. The staff recommendation is
The staff recommendation was 5. The alternate is the 4.5 foot.
The alternate is 5.5. I believe that is what we're.
The alternate is 4.5.
4.5. So it would be the alternate staff recommendation of 4.5
Case number.
in use permit V-11220-17-UP-1 as recommended by staff and subject to the conditions listed in the alternate resolution, with the addition of 2 conditions. One being that the removal of the awning is commensurate with the pouring of the footings. And 2, that the stair material be of a quality with stringers at 12 foot on center and 2 by thickness tread materials. And I'm willing to have any artistic corrections on that language.
Do you have a second?
I have a question. We were mentioning downspouts too.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if downspouts ought to be considered. And I was trying to find a reference to them.
Where is the reference in the submission to the downspouts? Is that in the plans, or just, is that also like the other in the supplementary materials? Does the applicant's agent want to speak to that? I think you'll need to come to the microphone.
So you can add the third, it's been seconded.
It may not be necessary.
It shows on the drawings on the rear elevation, and there's actually a note that says downspout to drainage boot to underground pipe to daylight.
So that is covered in the submission.
It's on the drawings.
Is that acceptable?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That would be acceptable.
So we have, Ms. Malice has moved, Mr. Owen has seconded the alternative resolution with 2 additional conditions.
I would have a question for staff, Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen.
As phrased, does staff think the conditions are enforceable for what we're attempting to do?
I think they're going to be, it's going to be an extra step that wouldn't normally occur in our review process. So we don't stand there and watch construction.
Right.
And the only way to enforce this would require a zoning enforcement staff person being present when this activity takes place.
I guess that wasn't my question as I had intended it, so that wasn't exactly my question. But I would say, in response to that, wouldn't your inspectors for the stair construction be able to inspect the stairs after they are built?
I was talking about the removal of the awning.
Okay, and so the removal of the awning,
Stair would be,
if there were footings poured and also an awning, then they would be able to see the violation, right?
we generally, enforcement is handled on a complaint basis.
Right.
We don't go out and view.
So if you got a call
Right.
from a neighbor, say,
Right.
that said, the footings are poured and I still see the awning, come out here, then you would be able to see that the footings are poured and the awning's there and you could take an enforcement action. Okay. So my question actually was about Ms. Malice's motion's phrasing, the words that she used in the motion that I seconded. And my question is, are those words sufficient for your staff to be able to know exactly what it is they are supposed to be enforcing?
It sounds like, and you can correct me, that if as soon as any efforts are taken to pour footings, the awning should be gone.
I think my term was concurrent.
Commensurate is what I wrote down.
I thought concurrent.
I personally don't care exactly where we draw the line. I just care that at some point you think the words are specific enough that you could begin an enforcement action if
Yes.
needed. Okay. And then with regard to the stairs, do you think the description of what's required in the stair construction is sufficiently precise to allow you to enforce it with an inspection later, were there to be a complaint?
I mean, that's going to be shown on the drawings, and so that it would be caught early on.
Actually, we just established it's not shown in the drawings.
I mean, they would be more detailed for.
For the building
Oh,
permit.
there'll be additional submissions.
Right.
But prior to the building permit issuing, and you could, got it, okay. So we have enforceable additional conditions, it sounds like. Great, thank you.
And just I might add that I think, given all the time that's been devoted to the discussion of the awning, I would be utterly amazed, frankly, if it wasn't gone next week, but certainly by the time the concrete truck shows up. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11250-17-UP-2 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 5.5 feet from the porch to the left side property line instead of 8 feet as required. Staff recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Thank you. Questions for staff? From the applicant, please. Applicant.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Tanya Coder.
Could you speak up, please?
My name is Tanya Coder. We've been at this property for 17 years and are looking forward to improving upon the property in a manner that's commensurate with the rest of the neighborhood.
I think questions for the applicant? Hearing none. We have no speakers. Mr. Malnick.
I have a quick question for the staff. I'm noticing that it looks like the porch is currently 5.5 feet to the left side property line, but I noticed the variance allowed 6 feet, a 6-foot setback. And is that a typo, or I was just wondering about that discrepancy.
Yeah, so I noticed the same thing, and so I did a little bit of research on that. And it looks like whenever they approved it the first time through the board, that the 6 foot was in reference to the base, and there wasn't a advertisement for the roof overhang of the porch. But you can see that the roof appears to extend a little bit further than the base. And so I think that that's where the discrepancy is, that the first advertisement and board approval referenced the 6 foot setback to the base of the porch and did not identify the roof overhang.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Questions? Motion?
Madam Chair,
Ms. Malice.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving use permit V11250-17-UP-2, subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11252-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 19.3 feet from the porch base instead of 21 feet as required, and 18.3 feet from the porch eave instead of 19.5 feet as required to the front property line. The staff recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for the staff? Hear from the applicant, please.
Good evening. I'm Steve Chan, the applicant. We believe that the staff has done a great job documenting the issues here, and we have no further comment, but happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant?
I'm sorry. Is the photo up the same as the application?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
That's the old house.
That's not a structure that exists
No,
today.
that's the old house.
Now I understand what I'm confused.
Our maps are a little out of date.
This is the current structure that you have up
This is the
right now.
current house.
Okay, great.
Mr. Melnick,
I'd like to make a motion.
please.
Okay. In case V-1125217-UP1, I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals grant the use permit request with the conditions as stated.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Melnick, seconded by Mr. Owen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11253-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 21.9 feet and 21.15 feet from the wall to the 16th Street North right-of-way instead of 25 feet as required, 20.9 feet and 20.15 feet from the eave, and 17.4 feet from the window well to the 16th Street North right-of-way instead of 21 feet as required. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for the staff?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen.
Thank you. This was one of two sites that when I visited them on checking out these sites in person, I did not see any yellow signs up and down either of the blocks that this fronts on. And that concerned me a little bit. There was another property as well in this week's meeting where I didn't see them. Can you talk about what the methodology is or the follow-up or the quality control for putting up the notice signs in the neighborhood?
So the placard postings in the neighborhood is something that's required under the zoning ordinance under Article 15. And it's the responsibility of our zoning enforcement, zoning inspectors who go out and place those placards. And they do complete a placard posting verification form, which indicates the dates and the location at which they posted them. I believe the posting verification form for this particular property indicated that they were posted on Monday.
On Monday? So only 2 days ago. So that explains why I didn't see them when I visited on Saturday.
That would explain why they weren't there on Saturday.
What is the goal for how far in advance of a BZA meeting they're posted?
I think
We request them.
I think the goal is usually within a week of the meeting date, but there isn't a time frame that's specified or required for how far in advance they have to be posted.
I see. Okay. Okay. I think I might want to address that more at another time.
Okay.
But I think, and I just for the record, what notification from the government went to the rear neighbor of this property, which in this case is the hospice?
Our public notice mailing was sent to the hospice location, addressed to them at that address, which is the address that they have listed with the real estate assessment office for noticing.
Thank you.
Applicant, please.
Good evening, and thank you for hearing our case. My name is Colleen Lurch, and my husband and I bought our property about 12 years ago, before we had kids and all the fun stuff that comes with it. And we slowly came to the realization a couple months ago that we had officially run out of space in our home. We love our neighborhood. We have enjoyed great relationships with our neighbors over the years, and that was one of the reasons that we decided that it was in our best interest to improve our existing home rather than sell and leave the county or the area. So we have gone down this process hoping that we'll be able to live in a bigger home in our neighborhood. We've taken great care to not disturb the appearance of the neighborhood and thinking about our renovations, keeping with the essence and the authenticity of our community. And we've also obtained a number of neighbor support. We've got 3 additional signatures on top of what we had previously submitted. We did think it was very important for us to communicate upwards and outwards to our neighbors across 16th Street as well as on Buchanan Street. We've had other homes in our area be renovated, and those neighbors showed us that courtesy, and we wanted to show that back to them.
Questions for the applicant?
The additional signatures that you have, does staff have them?
I have copies.
Does that happen to include 1522, the person right across the street from you?
Yes. That 1522 should be the first one on.
Yes.
Our neighborhood skips a number, so there's one number that doesn't have a house, but we got all of our immediately surrounding neighbors to sign.
Can you describe the outreach you've made, if any, to the hospice?
So we haven't spoken with the hospice, and we're happy to speak with the hospice. We don't come into counter with them ever. We, at one point, they had part of their fence encroached upon our yard, and they took care of it right away. And we don't have any other type of issues or interactions with them. I think we'd certainly let them know before any type of construction crew had come along. And if we have to notify at some other point, we're happy to. We have no issue with that.
Ordinarily, we would have, and many of us would have an expectation that for a rear addition, that the rear neighbor would be contacted and we would get some kind of written feedback from them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when the rear neighbor is institutional, then people feel like, okay, well, what does it matter if there's a church or, a commercial building? My personal view is even when it is a church or a commercial building, I still like to see the outreach. In this case, my concern is that given the nature of what the hospice is, what it's for, I'm actually not necessarily expecting that they would care all that much about the form and the architecture of what you're building. But I could imagine them having some concern, or at least the patrons, patients, is that what hospice users are called? Patients? The patients of the hospice might have particularly great concern about construction disruption. And that's not something that we usually here on the BZA talk a lot about.
Right.
I think it actually generates an enormous amount of neighbor friction, but it doesn't really bubble up to the surface of our deliberations. But I could easily imagine some of your literally short-lived neighbors feeling a lot of strain from lack of care in the way that you manage your contractors during the construction process.
Yeah.
Construction is inevitably disruptive, and you have a right, potentially, if this is granted, to build onto your house. You seem like a reasonable person, and I hope that as part of being reasonable, that you would make an effort to recognize the activities that are going on behind your house, and consider whether or not, out of the goodness of your heart, you would want to take unusual efforts to talk with them about managing your contractors in a way that minimizes the hardship to people in that building.
Yeah, absolutely, and we take that to heart. We had talked with both of our contractors, one of whom is here with us today, about the fact that we don't want to be disruptive to any part of the neighborhood. We also are on 16th Street, which we know is right by the hospital, and even too for our neighbors adjacent. You know, we don't want them to suffer from nails and tires or other type of debris on their home if it could all be avoidable. And certainly, if we are to get to the point of construction, we would take absolute great care to make sure we weren't disturbing the hospice any more than the 16th Street noises and sirens typically do anyway.
I heard one when I visited.
All the time.
I would just say that I lived in this neighborhood for many years, including the time at which the old school was converted to the hospice, and the neighborhood relationship is very strong. Also, on this particular side of the block, there have been both rear additions and completely new houses built since hospice has been there. So my guess is that there are ways to work cooperatively, and that they will be just as willing to do that as they always have been throughout the neighborhood.
And our intention is to be there for the next possibly 20 years, God willing. So we have no interest in making bad ends at year 12 of potentially 32.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Owen.
I would move, which one are we on here? I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving the use permit V-11253-17-UP1, subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next case.
V-11254-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 17.5 feet from the porch base to the North Kennesaw Street right-of-way instead of 21 feet as required, and 16.2 feet to the eve instead of 19.5 feet as required, and to permit a setback of 5.2 feet from the wall to the right side property line instead of 8 feet as required. This is for a new front porch and right side addition, and the staff recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for staff? Applicant, please.
Hello, my name is Kelly Morrison-Lee. I'm co-owner of the property, and I think the file is pretty much clear and complete, but just wanted to express our excitement about the project and moving forward with something we think will really be a positive for our community and our neighborhood.
Questions for the applicant?
If there's no other speakers,
Mr. Melnick?
I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
All right. In case V-1125417-UP1, I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals grant the use permit request with the conditions as stated in the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Melnick, seconded by Mr. Owen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11172-17-UP-2 is a use permit request to modify a previously approved use permit for the addition of a loft dormer over a new two-story dwelling. The staff recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the subject use permit with conditions.
Questions for the staff? Applicant, please.
Good evening. My name is Honor O'Hare, and I'm the homeowner. My husband, myself, and our two kids are building this house for us to live in. After our original BZA submission, we decided to add a loft and loft dormer to our plans. We've consulted with our neighbors who have sight lines on this loft dormer, and they're supportive of our plans. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the project.
Questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Melnick,
I'd like to make a motion.
please.
Okay. In case V1117217UP2, I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals grant the subject use permit with use permit amendment with the conditions as stated in the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Melnick, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11255-17-UP-1 is a use permit to permit a setback of 15 feet and 18 feet from the landings to the rear property line instead of 21 feet as required. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for staff? Applicant, please.
Good evening. I'll thank the board and the staff for its time. I'm Alexander Zolan, one of the homeowners with my wife, and I would urge the board to adopt the recommendation of the staff and allow us to take out the deck to provide more yard space for our 3 young children. What we're trying to build is going to take up less room in the backyard than the deck that's currently there, and I hope that it could be approved. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Ms. Malice.
Thank you for the signatures that you got from your 2 neighbors. You have a neighbor behind you at 3708.
We do.
Have you had any contact with them?
So we have tried. I think we're on different schedules. They may have been away the past week when we were really trying hard to get some feedback from them. We've got 3 young kids. My wife's at home with them during the day. They've got 2 older kids. I think when I'm coming home from work and knocking on the door, they're out doing things after school, and we haven't been able to get in touch. I will note, and I admit I didn't know this when we filed the use permit, or when we filed the application for the use permit, but I noticed that the staff noted that the house behind us has a use permit to do something very similar to what we're trying to accomplish, because we both have these odd triangular-sized backyards. So I can't imagine that our rear neighbor is going to have a problem with what we're trying to do. They won't even be able to see it because of the fence between our houses. And we've tried to get in contact with them and have failed. And I apologize for that.
All right. That makes it a little more difficult for us. So explain to me why this will be less intrusive than what you have now.
Well, what we're trying to build is going to take up less room. It's not going to be any higher than what we have now. What we'd like to do is maximize the amount of yard space, and we're trying to do that in the least intrusive way possible. So what we're trying to build are just landings sufficient to walk out the door and then steps down to grade. I think that it'll take up less room. None of our neighbors will be able to see it when they're standing in their backyards. So I don't think it's going to cause any. I don't think anybody's going to be looking at it and thinking it's an ugly structure. We're also trying to make it not an ugly structure, but.
Here.
Mr. Melnick.
I have a couple questions. There's one survey drawing. I don't know if you have a copy. So it's the one with a little diagram at the top of the rear yard elevation.
It's the plat
Yeah, it's called plat showing house location.
with the.
And it's the one with the little drawing of the house at the top.
I see it.
And so, we're talking about landings here, but I see like this little structure, almost like a little addition that appears on the left side. And I was trying to figure out what that is because I didn't see any structure over there.
Oh, that's the sunroom. It's in the picture. It's already built. That's all that is.
Okay.
That's what's white in our picture.
That is what is white in that picture. It's currently on the property.
Okay, yeah, I see it, but I was...
It's off to the side. That's not a rear view. That's a side view.
No, because this says rear yard elevation.
No.
But, yeah, I was trying to orient myself because I see it.
Are you asking why it doesn't look like it's on the plat itself?
Yeah.
It's on the top view? It is. It's the thing that is right above the driveway. It's just part of the house. It's not differentiated from the house.
Okay, I gotcha. It's just, I see what you mean.
It's kind of like a widow's walk on the top of it.
Yeah, that's right. There is.
Okay. All right. And so just so I can get an idea of what the structure is this going to be simply for walking to the steps, or is it going to be deck-like at all? It's hard for me to tell. Is it big enough for a grill? Or
it is not big enough for a grill. Well, I guess it could be big enough for a small grill. We don't plan on grilling on the landing. If you go back a couple of pages in the staff's packet from the one we were just on, there is a picture, a framing plan that shows the size and what it's going to look like, what these landings will look like. Mm-hmm. What they are is they're just a platform. I mean, it's a small. It's called a landing here. It's a platform. It's a small deck maybe, but it comes out 4 feet from the back of the house to provide enough room to walk out and turn, walk down the stairs for one of the landings, the one off the sunroom. For the one that comes off the other back door, it just goes out, I guess, it goes out 4 feet with a couple steps down to grade.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Sure.
I have a question for staff.
Mr. Holland?
This was the other property where I noticed no signs. Can you tell us anything about the signage experience for this parcel?
Yeah, the posting verification confirms that this was the same day on Monday that these were posted.
Got it. And do you know if any signs were posted within view of the rear neighbor?
I do not, but I can look and see.
I think that would be helpful information.
Ms. Clement, would the rear neighbor have received a letter?
Yes, I did confirm that a notice was sent to the rear neighbor.
So there's a triple redundancy we aim for, right? Yes. There's the letter, the signs, and the neighbor-to-neighbor contact. Mm-hmm. So and the newspaper, right? For all of those who read the Washington Times, they will also know. Washington Times classifieds, they will also know.
So the posting verification verifies that the postings were made along North Pershing Drive and at the corner of North Pershing Drive and North Nelson Street, but there were no postings on 4th Street North.
Okay. So that goes on my list of things to mention later. Okay.
Other comments, questions?
My view is I think the applicant has done a very good job remaining calm during this discussion because I think that the actual substance of the application is incredibly reasonable. And I think I share his view that it would have to be a really unforeseen outcome for any rear neighbor to object to this particular reconfiguration. So I'm inclined to make a motion to support the variance.
Please.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving the use permit V-11255-17-UP1 subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Second.
Okay.
One is what's on the
Slide is wrong. Okay.
title.
Wow.
So, staff, can you confirm that V-11255-17-UP1 is the correct thing to be moving on?
UP-1 is correct.
That is my motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
The board and the staff again for its time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11256-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 8.2 feet from the porch to the right side property line and 8.6 feet from the new sunroom to the left side property line instead of 10 feet as required, and to permit an aggregate side yard of 16.8 feet instead of 24 feet as required. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for the staff? Applicant, please.
Hello, I'm Christine Kelly, and I'm the architect. Michael and Sarah Gergo could not be here this evening. I have read the staff report and accept the conditions, and also wanted to note that we do have a letter of support from the immediate neighbor to the east who's most affected by the use permit application, and I'd be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the architect representative? Hearing none. I have a slip from Annette Graber.
Hello, and good evening. Thanks for your support to the community in Arlington. I am the neighbor on the other side of this residence at 4899, and I'm very pleased to hear the board asking so many questions about the concerns of neighbors all around properties, because while I don't necessarily have any particular complaint or concern about this particular building, the process has been a little bit vague and not very clear. So I was glad to be able to come tonight to get the notice that this was being discussed tonight so that I could actually look at the actual plans. I do have a question about the plans, the way it's drawn, and whether or not there's, I just want to be clear. So on my side of the house is where there is being a covered porch built, or a sunroom built. That's it. And so, as you can see, construction has already begun. I believe, will there be a railing that will be now required next to the new basement stairs? And does that structure actually, is that where the measurement is taken from to the property line, or is it to the actual house? And I apologize that I wasn't able to look at this before this evening.
So the dimension for and I think is 8.6 feet on that side, is assumed to be to the wall of that sunroom, not to the edge of what would be this basement areaway. Whether or not a railing is required there, I would maybe defer to the architect. There may be a requirement under the building code to require a railing. But as long as this basement areaway is at least 5 feet from the side property line, then that's an allowable encroachment on that side.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to ask the question. Like I said, I actually didn't know about the addition until construction began, so I greatly appreciate the board's persistence in making sure that neighbors are aware of construction and have this opportunity to come and learn.
Mr. Owen.
May I ask how you got notice that this was on our agenda tonight?
Mike? I received a notice in the mail. I was actually out of town the last week, and when I came home and got my pile of mail on Monday, there was a notice saying that there would be that this would be discussed this evening.
So I just, the chair noted that I didn't have my microphone on, so that my question was, how did you get notice of the meeting? And you've just given the answer. Thank you. So just to clarify, you first learned of this meeting from a mail notice you received 2 days ago. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then let me ask a question for staff. Are these additions already, in fact, under construction? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so the sunroom portion is currently under construction. There was a permit that was issued for that, and as it was presented on that building permit, it is a by right addition. What now causes it to get into this issue of requiring the use permit is because now they're modifying for that roof covering on the other side to now extend further, which now creates an issue in maintaining the aggregate. So sunroom alone isn't an issue. Sunroom with the roof covering on the other side presents this.
So if we were to vote no on this, the sunroof could still be completed?
That's correct.
By right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm.
Any other questions of the speaker?
Just
Mr. Owen.
Just to confirm, you feel you have the clarification, you saw it on the railing, is that right?
Yeah, it was confusing to me in the mailing because it said that and actually the neighbors, I don't want necessarily for their work to stop or for them not to be approved, but they did reach out probably some time ago and said there is going to, we want to do a project and there's going to be a sunroom and it's going to encroach on the other side. So they said, Annette, you don't need to worry about it. I said, okay, that's okay. But then when the construction began, I realized that there was actually a structure being placed like on my side. And so I began to ask more questions. The notice made it sound a little bit like it wasn't clear to me if the variance was for both sides or just the one side. So I came to here and to look at the plan. So I think my questions have been answered. Is
Thank you.
Bottom line. Okay,
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would say for the record that when it comes to neighborhood notification, this application is a little lean because we only have one signature, and if you've been sitting here throughout the evening, you can see that applicants typically endeavor to contact all adjoining and abutting neighbors so that they know what's going on and bring us some indication that they've done that. And in this case, it was only one, and so the neighbor who just spoke was completely reasonable in wondering why something's being built next to her that she didn't know about. So this one is a little less than optimal.
Well, the addition that is being built is a by right addition, and asking for the extension, it is to the east side, which I can understand your confusion as to how the phrasing of our request was phrased. It does sound like we're asking for the west side. But
So even when there's an even when the construction is on one side, I think we are viewing it as any construction on that property is of interest to all surrounding, even if they're not immediately affected. And so that has been the direction that the board has gone in making sure that there's a wider arc of notification, just to make sure that everybody's on board, because the applicants are asking for special consideration.
right, I understand.
You may do additional business in the county. That might be an added value you can add.
I always encourage my clients to notify as many people as possible.
And we're also looking for neighbors across the street, for rear yard neighbors, someone else earlier tonight said anyone with a sight line to the project, right? So that's sort of our high expectation. And so if you have future clients in Arlington, maybe you can mention that to them.
We will get tons more signatures. Sorry about this one.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Owen.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving the use permit V-11256-17-UP-1 subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11257-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 5.8 feet from the porch to the right side property line instead of 8 feet as required, and 18.6 feet to the street right-of-way line instead of 21 feet as required. Staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the use permit request with conditions.
Questions for staff? Applicant, please.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Bender. I own the house with my wife. I don't really have anything to add to the staff's report, but happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
You just heard our previous discussion.
Yes. This is our first time before the board. We got our next door neighbor who, the houses are much different than the picture, but where the neighbor whose house, butts where the roof would go. But since the notices went out, I think several of our neighbors saw the yellow flyers on the street, and we've spoken to them, and everybody's been supportive, offered to, help out, and we just didn't realize that additional physical signatures were useful to the board, but can represent that the neighbor across the street and the neighbor next to the neighbor who submitted the signed letter both verbally indicated their support for our project.
So you seem very friendly, earnest, and trustworthy. I have no doubt about any of the things that you've said just now.
9 o'clock.
But we have had previous discussions here about written notice that goes to applicants. So I guess I'll first turn to staff. Have we begun the practice of submitting the chairman's notice to applicants that says what our goals are for neighbor contact?
In writing, it's something that we, I believe, tell the applicants verbally, and we email them as well.
Right. So some number of months ago, there was a...
we haven't modified the application.
So is there any kind of written notice to applicants along the lines of the paragraph that the chairman had drafted a couple of months ago?
We email them when we inform them about the meeting and encourage them to do it at that time.
Those words go by email to applicants, right? So now my question for this applicant is, do you remember receiving an email that, among other things, described our expectations for neighbor contact?
Yeah, I believe within the past 2 weeks, our first email about that were on the agenda said that any neighborhood contact, we should submit signatures with the initial application or bring copies.
But by that point, you had already submitted your initial application.
Oh yeah, I mean our initial application was submitted January, February, or a couple months ago.
So that information was a little late for you to act on it before the initial application.
Right. Yeah. I guess just looking at the guidelines on the website, I can't remember what the guidance on the website suggested before when we were preparing the application, but.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving the use permit V-11257-17-UP-1 subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11077-15-UP-2 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 9.8 feet to the left side property line instead of 10 feet as required, and an aggregate side yard of 15.8 feet instead of 18 as required. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the subject use permit with conditions.
Questions for staff? We hear from the applicant, Naomi Verdugo, on behalf of the applicant, I assume.
Debbie Shuey's out of town on business, so she wanted me to read this. The application is to convert an existing sun porch to a year-round space. While doing this, a second story will be added to create a master bath and walk-in closet. The existing footprint does not meet current standards for proximity to the property line. This process was approved by BZA in November 2015. However, after BZA approval, a review of the architectural plans by the county's building staff determined that the wall facing the backyard needs to be 1 foot 8 inches higher than the drawings indicated. To account for this, the architect revised the drawings, raising the back wall height and adjusting the roof height and slope. The modifications do not cause the house height to be above Arlington County limits, but the change required the project to go back through the BZA process, which is why I am here to ask you to approve the requested change. Thank you for your consideration.
Questions? Comments?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Ms. Malice.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving use permit V-11077-15-UP-2, subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Mr. Melnick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case, please.
V-11258-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 2.1 feet from the wall of a shed and 1.5 feet from the eave to the rear property line instead of 10 feet as required. And the staff's recommendation is to defer the subject request to the May 17th hearing so that we can re-advertise it to include a reduction to the yard setback to the right-of-way line.
So, Madam Chair, the street easement,
That's correct, from the street easement.
so the setback is now from the easement?
Yes, the required setback should be measured to the easement line. And so therefore, technically, we need to advertise for a 20-foot setback to the easement line.
And as we can see, the shed is already built.
The shed is already there.
Any other questions for the staff? Comments?
It's a deferral, right?
I just say for the record that I have a speaker slip with a note that says, I only want to speak if this item is not rescheduled. Is it your pleasure to reschedule it?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Owen.
I would just further note that we received a letter from Shannon Staver that was presented to us at the beginning of the evening that I presume is now part of the record. It's a rear neighbor in opposition to the project.
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Ms. Malice.
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals defer use permit V-11258-17-UP-1 to the May 2017 BZA hearing.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Mr. Owen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next case. Last case.
V-11259-17-UP-1 is a use permit request to permit a setback of 13 feet from the deck to the rear property line instead of 21 feet as required, and 20 feet from the wall to the side property line instead of 25 feet as required, 19 feet from the eave instead of 21 feet as required, and 18 feet from the chimney instead of 23.5 feet as required. This is for a rear deck and a side addition. The staff's recommendation is to adopt the attached resolution granting the subject use permit with conditions.
Questions for the staff? We hear from the applicant, please.
Thanks for your time. I'm Barry Shackelford, and this is my wife.
I'm Heather Shackelford.
We're the owners and have read through the staff's report and feel it's accurate and adequate. Appreciate their time in that too. Also read through the conditions, and they seem perfectly reasonable, and we have no issues with those conditions, and hoping for your approval.
Thank you.
Madam
Questions
Chair.
for the applicant? Mr. Owen?
I just would note that I was pleasantly impressed that you had gone to the extent of talking to the apartment building behind you. That is the most affected property. Just goes to prove that just because the thing behind you is an institutional use does not mean you can't confer with them. And so I'm sad you're the last one up. So very few people can watch you being congratulated for taking that appropriate step. But it really impressed me, and I didn't want to go without mentioning that probably took a little bit of extra effort beyond knocking on a neighbor's door, waiting for their board to deliberate it on and so forth. And so I just wanted to express my appreciation for your having done that work.
Thanks for saying that. They probably have a special place in our heart because it was a worker there that saw someone who was breaking into our house, and they called the police.
Wow, awesome.
We're trying to look out for them as well. So,
Well, that's what we hope, that talking to neighbors has positive effects for everyone.
We have a motion, please.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen?
I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the attached resolution approving use permit V-11259-17-UP-2, subject to the conditions listed in the resolution.
Second?
Moved by Mr. Owen.
So now
Seconded
we
by...
have, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Uh-oh.
I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
So now we have another discrepancy with what's on the screen. So I just want to reconfirm that I have uttered the correct number, which is UP-2. Oh, actually, the motion differs from the top of the form.
The motion says 2.
Yep.
There was a previous BZA action on this property, so the correct number should be a UP-2.
Okay. So that was the motion I made.
Yes.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Owen, seconded by Ms. Malice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing. I have minutes from March 15th.
Hours.
Motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the March 15th, 2017 hearing.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Malice, seconded by Mr. Melnick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Move adjournment?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Owen?
I would just note that over the time you've been chair, the time I've been serving on the board, that we've had many conversations about neighbor notice and getting comments. And I really feel like our progress has been slow in sort of getting to a point of comfort level. And I also note that we wind up having these discussions during our regular meetings while people are waiting and, tired and groggy and perhaps cranky from our other work. And I just wonder, now I've discovered tonight, other notice issues that now concern me about people just finding out 48 hours before the meeting by mail and by posting. I hope that we might consider perhaps maybe having at some point a work session or something that is when we can, approach these questions in a relaxed way, in a public way, but with staff present. I don't know if that's something that other members of the BZA would be inclined to do, but I just throw that out there as a way to try to maybe more comprehensively address some of these issues in a way that's less taxing for all of us involved. So I just offer that.
Well, I think the chair's notice was intended to raise some of those issues, and it seems to be not part of the official packet. Maybe it goes out in an email, but maybe it needs to be more detailed in terms of not just your side-by-side, but front, back, and everything else. But also, I think that I think it's unacceptable that a notice goes up Monday for a Wednesday hearing. And I don't see any reason why whoever is detailed to go out and put up notices can't be told that it's got to be 2 weeks ahead or something that's reasonable, given the lives that everybody leads, and the fact that they're often out of town or whatever, that it just seems like our notification, I understand the legal letters that go out. I think that's fine and thorough. But I do think the posting, there are some drawbacks to the way we're doing the posting in terms of timing. And certainly, if we don't have a cover letter or some other way of speaking directly, making it really clear on the application, I think the application asks for too much to expect that that's where neighbor notification is going to be flagged. But I do think that whether it's staff sending an email, as long as it's really detailed and not just appearing to be a suggestion, we could do better on that. But I don't have objections to trying to have a get-together or maybe just starting earlier one night or something like that. We can explore that option too.
Madam Chair, I concur. It's just, if I think we need to also hear from staff if what issues they are facing, and I think having a dialogue is probably the best way, including zoning staff, if that's part of the team that we're relying on to sit face to face, because we obviously don't know what they face in terms of either workload or whatever. So I think the goal is to find a solution that we can all live with, and that we don't have unrealistic expectations that we then put on applicants. So I think maybe figuring out who the right people are to sit and sort of talk this through would be a great idea. And whether it's an hour before the meeting, I don't know, that's maybe difficult for work people, transportation, or finding another evening where we can just convene would be great. And I'll just throw out, we had one applicant that said he looked on the website to see if there was any guidance. I don't know if, certainly Chairman's, guidance about that could be put on the website as well. So lots of ideas that we have, but I think what's happening is we're increasing our expectations of what's happening, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in sync with staff.
I hope we have a reputation for reasonableness, not just for the neighbors, but also for the staff. And I think those are very good points, Ms. Malice, that I don't want to have any kind of unreasonable expectation for anyone involved, including the staff. And so hearing more details about what resources you have and what pressures you're under and what limitations there are may help us better understand what role we can play in creating the right expectations for everyone involved.
Sure. Okie dokie.
I think May is going to be a pretty busy night, so I don't know if that would work for next month, but maybe if we look at the calendar and pick a month where the agenda, it would have been probably nice to try to do today where the agenda isn't as heavy and set aside some time to talk about it. But I think next month is going to be...
It's going to be a busy hearing night?
Yeah. We deferred a lot to May, practically.
Oh, we
Also
deferred
having
something to October.
Yes, finally. Okay, can we have an adjournment, please?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Cheers. Bye.